let's just go through the 4 stages of affair recovery. And just to be very clear, there is no set timeline. This can be as short or as long as the two of you need to get through this, you and your husband. And again, I wish there was an easy way to say how to get through this, but at the end of the day, this is the hardest thing you're going to do. It's walking through hell, but do not be afraid to do this work. Do not be afraid to um, be here in this time, because there's a lot of stuff that's cracking open and that's shifting and changing. And there will be a time that you will be able to move forward, move out of this pain. You will find yourself on the other side stronger and just so much more alive within you. You'll discover more love and connection and intimacy, but you've got to do this work now. This is work that is going to pay off. So the first stage of the affair recovery is what we have been kind of deemed as D-Day. It's that discovery day, and that is going to be the stage of shock. So this is that day that you finally, you've probably, maybe you've had suspicions for a while. Maybe there's been some things that have been off, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it. This is the moment where there is no denying the truth, and this is going to usually be when you accidentally read some text messages, or someone calls you to tell you, or maybe your husband actually does come out and confess it. So that first initial shock. And a lot of it correlates with the healing process. The healing process, I have really begun to relate to the grieving process. This is such a loss that even though it's not the loss of another person, it is still a huge loss of yourself, the life you had been living, the man that you had been married to. So there's so much loss here. So it kind of correlates with the grieving process as well. And that very first initial grieving process is shock as well, and as well as denial. So a lot of times at this first stage, you may have a sense of denial, like, okay, I this cannot be happening. This cannot be happening. I am, please, dear God, let this be a big nightmare, right? So you have that stage to it, and you kind of walk in a fog for a little while. You're kind of dazed. You don't know what even to do, right? So in this stage of shock, there's really not a whole lot that you can do except get through the day. Um, the beautiful thing about the human after that shock happens is when all the floods of emotion happen, right? That's when all this stuff starts flooding through you. But in that beginning, it's just kind of this stunned stage where you don't even really know how to act or what to say or what to do. From that second stage, you'll come into what I have called the unraveling stage. Now, this stage is definitely going to be the stages of grief that is going to have a lot more of the anger. And so it's this heightened emotions that you will begin to feel the pain. And this is when the real true chaos begins to start happening. And there's going to be unraveling of you. So you are going to begin to unravel in the sense of, I don't even know who I am. There's a huge loss of self in through this. You begin to just have all these chaotic thoughts as to, was like, rejection, unlovable, right? So there's so much of this unraveling within yourself. And one thing about, as you begin to unravel, the big questions that you really have to grapple with during this time is, who am I? What do I want? And what sort of boundaries do I need to start figuring out? Because more than likely you have never even talked to your husband, or you've never even thought about what it means to have an affair or a betrayal, let alone talk with your husband. It is very, very uncommon for a person to sit down and really think through what is betrayal to me. There's so many different levels of betrayal. There's, what just in recent years, emotional affairs have just in recent years become a thing that didn't even used to be a thing generations ago. Uh, so even that, like emotional attachment, but not even sexual, is a betrayal. Whereas some people, maybe sexual encounters, but no emotions are involved. One night stands. Maybe is that a betrayal for you? Is a drunk night at the bar making out with a stranger, is that betrayal? Like the things that we don't think a lot about them, but yet maybe it's kind of understood. So during this time, all this unraveling is coming out. Like you're kind of faced with these unspoken things that we've never really even grappled with. Usually it's just one of those unspoken things, you just don't do it, and then now here we are doing it. And so this is going to be a lot of that unraveling for you. There's also a lot of unraveling on your husband's side. So, just as much as this is happening to you, this is happening to him. And if he is still in the affair currently, there is going to be another layer of unraveling for him because he now has to grapple with himself. He has to ask all those same questions. Who am I? What am I doing? What do I want? You are over here grappling, what do I want? Who am I? And he's having to grapple with this same thing. He's having to face this thing and that for whatever reason has a slippery slope depending on your situation. Every situation is different. Every situation is going to be look different and be different. So there's no real cut and dry sort of thing. And so if he's in the middle of this affair still, he's now got to unravel and untangle all that. He has got to really grapple with, what do I want? If he's still in the affair, does he want to stay in the affair? Is he going to leave his family? Is he going to leave the affair? So there's so much going on here. So many things to unpack and unwind and bring into the light. There'll probably be still, this is during the time that you're still going to be uncovering parts of the affair. This has been a whole secret life that your husband has lived without you knowing. So there's going to be so many secrets coming out. There may be continued secrecy, there may be continued lying. So there's all of this is during this unraveling stage, and it's very normal to be in this stage. And I want to make it very clear that during this stage there is no moving forward. There is no way that you can move forward until both you and your husband are on the same page. And typically during this time, you're both not on the same page. If you discover the affair, he went from working a secret life to now suddenly being faced with you knowing about that secret life. And now, so there's all this grappling, there's all this unraveling. And so there's really no way to move forward at this point. So at this point, it's one of those, let's make it through today. That's all I have to do is just make it through today. And something I really, really want to stress through this is this is not the time to make any lasting decisions. In other words, this is not the time to run to the divorce court and file for divorce, because in this time your emotions are heightened. There's so many chaotic thoughts. Everything is upside down during this time. And so to make these lasting decisions, you are really not in a right mind. Neither one of you are in the right space to make such a lasting decision that will really affect you, your children, in a long-term sort of way. So before we make that decision, let's clear up this mess that we're in right now. And so it's there's a separation of the two. You have to kind of separate the two in your mind and have two different categories going on. So right now, we're not making any long-lasting decisions about our marriage. Right now, we're trying to figure out what's going on with this affair, right? So if you can kind of separate the two during this time, the marriage is put on hold, and it is not, we cannot move forward with this until we fix this. or at least not fix it in a way of like it's all better. Let's get to the point where we have now come together with this. So during this time, there may be a separation, though. I do want to say that separation may be necessary, may be beneficial, especially if your husband is not ready to end the affair, if he is not ready to fully commit to the marriage. I just want to make sure that you know that that's very normal during this time. It doesn't mean that it's the end. It doesn't mean that the marriage is over if he's having a lot of untangling that he's having to work through. So give this little this little section of recovery some time. It's the most painful time. It is so extremely chaotic and it's so hard to know what to do. But as much as you can, this is going to be a survival time. It's not going to be a healing time moving forward. It's just going to be a survival time. So, some of the things that I really want to um, make sure that during this time that you are, these are the things you want to do or not do. So one of the things that I really want you to do during this time is to back off from the relationship, backing off from fixing the marriage or wanting to work on things, asking your husband for the commitment. If you're not getting um, full transparency from your husband, that's a sign that you're still in this unraveling. If you notice, if he's still making excuses or not being completely um, honest about how things are, if he's trying to downplay it or avoid it at all costs, and you can sense it, you know it, you can feel when there is not a sense of um, remorse. You're not getting a lot of remorse during this time, or you're getting a false remorse, but yet you're still picking up these vibes that things are not all in the up and up. So if you get any of that, just know this is where you are. So you need to step back from the relationship a little bit, and the relationship and meaning the marriage. Okay. So that means at this point, if you're committed to the marriage and you're like, I want to make this work, um, that that means stepping back from texting, I love you, I want to work this out, begging for him to stay, begging for him to end it, or whatever it is, right? So any sense of that, trying to get the relationship back on track or fixing the relationship, that needs to be stepped back. So just kind of give an example. So when I was going through this, I was desperately trying to get him to break it off with her and come home. And so I kept thinking in my mind that the more I could remind him of how we used to be or how much he loved me. For instance, this is not the time to get out the marriage book, the wedding book, or the family photos from past vacations. This is not that time to bring this stuff out. So I noted the more I was doing this stuff and just begging and demanding and texting I love you, the more I was getting resistance, and the more I would get just stop it, leave me alone, and just this sort of thing. And that's when I finally realized that in my grasping for him to hold him in, he was the more he wanted to claw his way out. So anything that you're experiencing right now of any sort of disconnection, meaning one or both of you are turned away from each other, this is not the time to do any of the I love yous, let's get this fixed, can we go to therapy, all of that. Something else that I really, really highly recommend is don't talk to people, is meaning friends and family. I was the one that I immediately went and started talking to people. And let me just say, it has a lasting effect. People will always side with you. Your friends and family will always side with you. And then after you get through this stage, right, once you get through this chaotic, painful stage, Well, then if you get to the stage where the next stage where you're together and now all of a sudden you're working on the marriage, people are still back here. They still remember all the things and they are not quick to forgive. They are not willing to allow for reconciliation. And so you will have this long lasting a damage in the fact that now all of these people that you have poured your heart out to in this effort to find some sort of answers in this struggle, well, now they all have to carry that broken heart too, and now they're going to have to do that healing, and people won't, you know what I mean? It's not something that they find necessary. And so just to kind of give you a little story, I my best friend went through it with me, and we went through it all, like the whole thing. She knew, I mean, almost minute by minute details. She was such a good friend, always there supporting me, and she was the best friend a friend could have because she did the whole I don't agree with you staying, but because I love you, I'm going to support you. That is a wonderful friend. She really did support me when I said I'm going to save my marriage. I'm going to work on healing my marriage. And so it was about 6 years later. We had kind of lost touch. She had gone through her own separation and remarriage, uh, got remarried, and we had kind of lost touch over the years. And she'd called me about 6 years later and wanted to tell me how that she wanted to apologize because she didn't realize how much she still hated Matt for what he had done to me. And the twist of life for her was how that she had now been married for many I don't remember, 5, I guess by that point it had been 5 6 years, and she actually had an affair. And so she had come back to me to tell me that she wanted to apologize because she didn't realize how much she had hated him. But after she had had her own affair in her marriage, she realized how all those years in her marriage, when anytime she would talk about us, she would talk about Matt in such a hateful way and just was so angry at him, and she had never really forgiven him. And so it was such an eye opener for me that I had talked to so many people. So I don't even know how many people that I have talked to that are still having to hold that within them. So that is definitely something that I would strongly recommend. And you may already be someone that has that awareness to be like, I don't want people to know. People don't need to know this about us. That is good, perfect. You are doing the right thing. That's why I made this support group. That's why I have this group coaching. This is a safe place to talk about it. But then also, therapy is a really great place to talk about this and process it. And that's for you. You get yourself into therapy so that you can have these conversations, because we're still in the unraveling stage, right? We're still in this place, but you got to get some way to get this out and really process and talk about it. The one thing I recommend when you are looking for a therapist is when you're doing your due diligence and really trying to find someone that you connect with, ask them about their beliefs and their thoughts around marriage and reconciliation. It's really hard for therapists to leave their biased opinions on the outside of the door. We're human. We bring our biases in. And so if you I Oh, I am so much for fighting for the marriage, and I know not every marriage can make it, but I really do believe it should be marriage first. And when all all that has ever all the tools have been put to work and you've done everything possible and the marriage still cannot survive, that is one thing. But I really, really believe in putting the marriage first and giving the marriage a chance. So when you're looking for a therapist, really look for someone that is going to put family first and encourage that in the process. Okay, so as you're in this place, there may be separation. Like I said, do not make any final decisions as far as filing for divorce. Um, after you've kind of unraveled this and unpacked and you're kind of hit the bottom here, you're really at a point where a decision has to be made, and the decision usually comes to the fact that your husband either ends the affair and says, yes, I want to stay in our marriage, or he says, no, I don't want to end the affair, I am gonna go with the other person, or I just want to end the marriage, period. Whatever that is, it's kind of the decision has been made. But I'm going to say that the decision being made is the one that you both come together and say, I want to make this marriage work. And a lot of the reason why it's good when it's the unraveling stage and it feels like you're giving up and you're letting him just go live his life, just go have the affair. It's not really, it feels like it might be like that because you're not going to, I'm going to strongly encourage you not to constantly stalk him, check in on him. Where were you? What were you doing? Again, that kind of goes along the lines of the texting I love you is and all that, right? It's kind of that grasping, holding on. The tighter you're trying to hold on, the more he's going to want to get out. And in this during this time, you want to really allow there to be a honest unraveling of this, and it's gonna be okay. I know it feels so like the bottom dropped out and you don't know where you're gonna land, but if you really lean into that trust that it's gonna be okay no matter what, you're gonna be okay. Your children are going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. You just got to get through this. You've just got to allow for this to happen. And that's why it's the more you can have this sort of context about it, the more you can kind of ease off your desperate grasp of it. And the more you kind of let your hands off of it, and if he's not being transparent, then you can just assume he's still doing something. If he's not being forthcoming, then you can just assume something else is still happening. And so there's real no reason to go digging more and more and more if there is still that block there. And I get it. I've been there. I know the desperate grasping. I know how it feels, and you're just like checking every single social media, email, text message. I get it. I understand it. But the more you can ease off of that and focus on during this time is you're back to focusing on yourself, getting centered, paying attention to what you're feeling, asking yourself those questions. Who am I? What do I want? What is my commitment to this marriage? Really get into who you are and what this is for you, so that when the day comes and you and your husband have come onto the same page and you both have said, okay, we're gonna make this work for us. We're gonna stick to this. We're gonna fight through this, and we're gonna see what's on the other side. That's when the third stage comes up. That is your third stage, and this is the recovery stage. So this is going to be the first day that you together are going to move forward. So up until this point, there is no moving forward. It's a survival, it's an unraveling, it's trying to put all the pieces together, it's trying to get all your bearings. That's all you're trying to do during that time. And then once this decision has been made and you can sense, right, we're trusting ourselves. I can really sense there's been a shift in him. And he's saying, yes, we're going to work on this marriage. Now you're going to be able to start moving forward in this sort of thing. Now, the one thing that, if you're able to, you're gonna start having some really open conversations that you may have never had before. So one thing I learned in recovery is that a lot of issues that were there prior to the affair we had to work through after the affair. So one of the things was I had a really hard time being honest about my emotions and my feelings. So through this recovery, I discovered how emotionally wounded I was and how emotionally stunted, and how I had protected myself and so made myself very emotionally detached. So you're going to start uncovering a lot of uh, traumas from childhood, a lot of wounds from before. So this is not just healing from an affair. This is going to be healing from a lot of things that were going on prior, because the affair really was just a manifestation of all the other stuff that never was resolved within each of you. Again, his affair was not your fault, but within the marriage, there were parts of each of you had wounded parts that made the relationship unhealthy. And in that unhealthy relationship was how the dark path away and into another relationship happened. And so this is where you're now, the affair is here. That's hopefully been shut down and ended. And now here's the marriage. Now we're shifting back into the marriage, and this is what we're going to start healing. Yes, we'll still talk about this. We'll start unraveling and unpacking this part of it, but the pieces that we're going to unpack here are going to help us heal this. The, the mess over here is all this is going to give us clues, and it's going to give us a path back to ourselves to see what was missing here, what was wounded here, what was broken here, what can we fix together here. And now, so in this journey, the one thing I really would encourage at this point, you and your husband, is to really talk about honestly, what do you hope your marriage will become? Because the reason why I think this is a good question to really talk about early on is because I know, even talking with my husband Matt, he felt through the unraveling stage, and even before it even all came out, he said he had this sense that I'm screwing this all up and it's over, it's done. And he talks about how, like, even in his wound, like, he was so wounded within himself. He was so deprived within himself that he, in the middle of it, was willing to risk it all just to get some relief and some hope for this life that he had missed. But then when it all came up and he was smacked in the face with reality, it was like, well, I've screwed up too much. There's no way we will ever be able to get back to where we were. And so that was a big piece of the beginning of when we were finally standing there together. What do we want to get to? What do we hope to accomplish? And that's really kind of going to be the first time you will both be looking in the same direction. Probably for a while. It's been probably a while since you've both been able to think about it. And this might take some time, and it may be something you don't even believe could be possible. But maybe just really thinking about, I want to get to a place where we're happy again. And see, a lot of times through the affair, you can't unsee some things, right? You all of a sudden you start realizing, our marriage wasn't so great. There were a lot of problems there that we weren't dealing with. And so I remember afterwards, during, and when I was thinking about, going back and all that stuff, it was, it's not going to be like it was before. We're going to fix some things. It's got to be better. It's got to be better than it was before. And so I think this, if you can get you and your husband in that place, early on, as you begin to move forward and have those conversations, what do you see your life becoming? And maybe you don't even believe you can get there, or you know how, but that'll be a great place to kind of start seeing what you're working for. Um, and so in this time, you're going to each have your own expectations. You're each going to have to come to the table with your tools that you're going to do to heal. So I know a lot of times it seems like he's got to do all the lifting and all the work. So he does have to do all the work of repair. He's going to be doing the repair work as far as he has to be fully transparent. He has to be willing to be fully transparent. And the other thing that he has to be fully open to is ending the affair, and then he has to be willing to have these open conversations with you. Now, it's going to be really difficult for him because he's the one that brought the grenade, pulled the pin, and dropped it. So this is going to be a very, very tough thing. It's human nature when we're the ones that made the mess to bury ourselves in shame. We the difference between shame and guilt is shame says I did this because I'm a really bad person. So whereas guilt says I made a bad choice. So my choice does not define me as a person. I just made a really terrible choice. Guilt we can heal from because we recognize the choice that we made, and now I can do what I need to do to heal that choice. Whereas if I believe I am a bad person, that there is something horribly wrong and flawed with me, there's no fixing me, right? I am just a scumbag. And if I believe I'm a scumbag, there's nothing I can do. And so our human nature is to block this off. And a lot of times we will withdraw, we will attack other people, we will deflect and maybe blame. You'll see a lot of gaslighting, like all of that kind of stuff. And so you're gonna have to give some time and space for your husband to find the courage to step into this healing role. And that's why you have to be one to support him in this role. Yes, he's going to do the heavy lifting. He's going to be the one to give you all of his passcodes. He's going to be the one to block all that woman on all social media. He's the one that's going to have to do the things to show you that he means business. He means to move forward. He means to heal. So he is going to be all doing all of that sort of thing, but he needs your support in this and knowing that this is something that he has chosen to do, but it does not mean it's because he's a bad person. So if you notice him pulling away or causing a resistance to any one of these things, transparency, ending the affair, or the secrecy, maybe he may still want to have some secrecy. He may want to just blow it under the, shove it under the rug. It's water under a bridge, right? If anytime you see any resistance to wanting to face it or talk about it or look at it, know that it is more than likely shame. And so your role to come and support him is to commit to really committing to not punishing him for this decision. It's going to be hard because our anger in the beginning stages, that's why at the beginning when you're going through all this unraveling and you're really putting all the pieces together, that anger is really going to be that forefront emotion, and that's okay. You feel that emotion, but you really got to work yourself through the process to the point where your anger cannot be unleashed in a way of punishment on your husband, because that is not going to create healing. It will only cause more division. And if your true hope, if your true belief is that you want to come to a place of complete and total healing within yourself, within your husband, and within your marriage, then you have to commit to not using his affair as a punishment or a weapon against him. And I know that seems so like well, he needs to be punished. Believe me, as you're walking through this healing process, the consequences are going to be there. There will be many years of consequences that you will walk through because of this decision. The one thing that it will not be used as a weapon, unless you're looking to destroy your husband, unless you're hoping to just demolish the marriage and maybe even harm your children in the meantime, then you go you can punish him and really cause that that damage, but just know that that is not going to heal. It is only going to cause more hurt in the long run. So that would be your first thing, is really to commit to, and even come out and say that, like have that as your commitment. um, Please know that I am going to work at being very honest about how I'm feeling, but the one thing that I commit to is that I'm not going to ever use it as a weapon or a punishment against you. And then you can just even ask, say, are you willing to be fully transparent in allowing me to ask any questions that I have? Are you willing to commit to making sure that the affair is ended? And that's when you can really begin to start opening up these conversations. And that's where you can start weeding through the emotions, the pain, the hurt, the confusion, the why. The big question as to why did this happen? And that's where you can really start digging into those deeper questions and really begin to start putting these pieces together. And like I was saying, the affair um, is this piece. It's all these pieces, but each of these pieces, if it's going to take a lot of courage, it's going to be hard to face this and the other woman, and what she represented and what that represented to him, and all those things are going to be really hard to grapple with. But if you're willing to do this and look at the pieces, and it'll give you a trail that will lead you back to the wounded part of yourself and in your marriage and in him. And you'll be able to start working on these pieces, healing these, and bringing more of a connection here. Affairs over here, the marriage is over here. And this is where you are on the third stage of recovery, really recovering your marriage. Now, the last and final stage of recovery is one that I feel like is missed in the healing process in most people. And that is because you kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, we're good. I haven't had a trigger in a month, or we haven't had a breakdown. I haven't cried, myself to sleep in a while, and like we're good, and I can feel it. Like he's with me, I'm with him, and we've had so many, you know, marathon conversations, and we've ripped our hearts open, and we're just such a better place. And we find yourself in this connection, and you kind of sit back into life, and you get back into routine. It's very easy to get back into routine and feeling normal again. But this fourth stage is something that I really want you to kind of put a pin in it, and remember that this is going to be part of it as well. If you're if you're in another stage right now and you're not really at this final stage, just keep it in the back of your mind that this is something that you're going to want to remember and continue to keep this in the forefront for the long term. This is going to be the fourth stage is resiliency, and this is going to be the long tail. This is going to be now until the very end of time. So there is no way to make your marriage affair proof. But there's a lot of things that you can do to make your marriage affair resilient, meaning that there's things that you can do to strengthen your bond so that the affairs are not going to be a thing that could potentially happen. The way that affairs become harder and harder to get into or step into is the stronger the connection is between you and your husband. The more you keep this connection, the more there will be less of a desire to connect somewhere else. Not saying it won't ever happen, but it will make it much more difficult. So the long tail of this of recovery is the resiliency. It's really committing to, one, keeping the conversations open around the affair, around the things that you have discovered through the healing process. The big thing that you want to discover, I forgot to touch on it on this their third one with recovery, is to really dig down into the root of why it happened. And it's not going to be something as simple as we didn't have enough sex. It's going to have a deeper meaning, and most of the time it has something to do with not being good enough. Something within your husband felt not good enough, disconnected within himself, and he was looking for a fulfillment outside of himself. And so, more you get to that root, the more you find that, and the more, and you're going to be doing this for yourself as well. It's just not your husband that's got to find that. You're going to be doing the same inner work on the recovery. And now that you've both figured this out and you have a context around it, you have a vocabulary around it, you know what it looks like, you know and understand this fear, this insecurity, right? These things where you've been disconnected in the past, you know all these now. You've had the conversations, you've dealt with it. Now for your resiliency, you're going to keep the conversations open around that. Don't be afraid to come back. Don't be afraid to notice when things start getting off a little bit, kind of like going to a chiropractor. This is just going to be this adjustment time, and you will set, you can set, if you're a type A that's just very much a methodical type person, you can always have a check-in time. Once a quarter, you can have a date night where you guys go out and reconnect. And remember, this doesn't have to always be just like deep conversations around, you don't have to drudge up the affair. It's nothing like that. All these are is this resiliency of keeping in the forefront of your mind your relationship and your connection with your husband, keeping those open conversations, keeping yourselves vulnerable to one another, and that requires you to check in with yourselves and have some hard conversations even along the way when it's safe, because you've done this work. It's safe to talk about, hey, I have been feeling really disconnected. I think I'm getting overwhelmed with work. And you can just bring that conversation up and then use the tools that you've learned to what can we do to over the next few weeks reconnect. I just want to make sure we're staying connected, and you can move forward with that way. So these are the 4 different categories, or the 4 recovery stages. If you have any questions about these 4 stages, be sure to ask me. We can talk more about it. There's a lot that can go on, and I just want to make sure that this gives you some sort of context. Every stage is going to be at your pace. It's going to be variables of, because you got your husband and another person, family, all kinds of different dynamics going on. So there's no straight line. This is not a linear process. You may even move forward and back between stages 2 and 3 sometimes if there's a lot of other things going on, and that's okay. It's all okay, and really begin to give yourself space and time. There's no reason to rush. Again, I want to reiterate, we live in a culture. This Western culture is all about getting rid of the negative feelings, stuffing the negative feelings away, taking medication to forget about the negative feelings. And I am going to bring us all back here into this place that it's okay to become uncomfortable with feeling uncomfortable. Get comfortable with these negative emotions, because the more you're going to journey through, this will go all the way back into your resiliency. Your negative emotions are a siren. It's just like when you go and put your hand on a hot stove and the nerves in your hand sends a shooting pain through your body. That's not because you're a bad person. That's not, you don't need to like, I got to get rid of the pain. Yes, you do, but the pain is telling you get your hand off the stove. So the pain, the negative feelings that you're feeling right now is telling you there's something to look at, there's something to work on. And so don't be afraid to feel those negative emotions. Don't be afraid to sit in them for a while. Allow yourself to cry. Let them all out. Let the negative emotions out. If you fully allow yourself to feel the negative emotions, it takes about 7 minutes. 7 full minutes of just letting it blow through you. I think you'll begin to see how they will support you and help you in doing the inner work that